I do think there's ever a good idea to pick up a passenger that is unt in your usual pickup zone, or a passenger that makes you feel very uncomfortable. But one driver from Philadelphia made this mistake, and it cost her her life. So let me tell you about the horrific incident that ended the life of this driver, and how similar incidents have happened across the US. This is the story of the Ghost Rider. It was around 2 a.m. when she received a notification. A ride request in her area. Since she was almost off work for the night, she decided to take the request. As soon as she arrived at the curb, she could see that the passenger was ready. Her name was Stacy, a 38-year-old mother of two, who had been driving Uber all night to try and pay off some bills. She wasn't a stranger to late-night shifts. She knew that most people who hailed rides at such a late hour were drunk or high, but never had she encountered a situation like this. When the woman opened the door and got in, she did so silently. She sat down, fastened her seatbelt, and stared straight ahead, without saying a word. This was weird, but not enough to make Stacy cancel the trip. She needed the money too much. She asked her passenger, "Where to tonight?" She was met with silence. She turned to look at her passenger, but she was unfazed by the question and continued staring into the darkness ahead. Stacy was hesitant, but she finally decided to start the car. As she pulled away from the curb, she noticed that the passenger still hadn't entered her destination. She was looking at her phone and couldn't help but feel irritated. This was the first time anyone had ever gotten into her car without telling her where they wanted to go. She had to say something. Ma'am, I need you to enter your destination so I can get you there." The woman then turned to her and revealed a pair of icy blue eyes. They were lifeless and seemed to stare right through Stacy, unnerving her deeply. Before Stacy could respond, the woman reached out and pressed a button on her phone, then turned away again, leaving Stacy even more perplexed than before. Then the strangest thing happened. The app in Stacy's phone updated to show the exact same address the woman had entered in her own device. It was a small private cemetery far away from the city. The ride would be over $100. Normally, Stacy wouldn't have picked up a ride this late at night that went outside the city limits. There was nothing there, no streetlights, and she'd have to drive through winding dirt roads. But the fare was enticing, and she also thought that perhaps the woman needed help getting home at this hour. So she started the engine and drove them both toward the cemetery. Throughout the journey, the woman remained silent, staring out the window. Every now and then she would turn her head and look at Stacy with those piercing blue eyes, which made Stacy feel like she was being watched and judged. Stacy wanted to end the ride and get away from the eerie passenger. The longer she spent with her, the worse she felt. She just kept stealing glances at her in the rearview mirror, wondering what she could possibly want. She arrived at the cemetery and came to a stop at the entrance. The gates were locked, but the woman signaled for her to go ahead and drive inside. She slowly navigated the car through the overgrown path, until she saw the woman lean forward and press another button on her phone. The app displayed the exact location of a headstone deep within the cemetery. It was far from the entrance, and surrounded by tall trees that blocked out the moonlight. Stacy was unsure about going further. The cemetery was creepy, and the app was behaving erratically. But then she noticed that the woman was taking her bag from the back pocket and reaching inside. She took out a thick wad of cash and handed it to Stacy. "Here," she said. Then she took a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Stacy. "Please," she whispered. "I have to go." Stacy unfolded the paper and saw that it was a photograph. It showed the same woman sitting in front of the headstone where they were headed. She looked young and alive, a stark contrast to the haggard appearance she now presented. Before Stacy could ask any questions, the woman pushed her open and stepped out onto the cold ground. "Thank you," she said quietly. Stacy fumbled for words, but before she could utter a sound, the woman disappeared into the shadows between the graves. Feeling shaken and confused, Stacy followed the directions given by the app and drove to the indicated spot. When she turned off the engine, she noticed that the woman had left her phone behind. She reached for it, but as her fingers brushed against it, the phone burst into flames, reducing to ashes in mere seconds. Panic surged through her as she realized she was in grave danger. Turning back to the woman's seat, she found it empty, as if she had never been there at all. The windows were fogged up, making it impossible to see outside, which made Stacy even more uneasy. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she reached for her own phone to call the police. As the call connected, a voice crackled through the line. 911, what's your emergency? Before she could speak, the phone suddenly went dead. Fear tightened its grip on her heart as she realized She was completely alone in a dark cemetery with no way to contact anyone for help. Just then, a hand suddenly appeared on her shoulder, sending shivers down her spine. In a panic, she turned around, but her scream died in her throat as she saw the face of the woman sitting in her passenger seat. The woman's eyes glowed with an eerie light, and her skin was as pale as bone. "Get out of my car," she hissed, her voice a chilling whisper that echoed through the cemetery. But before she could react, the ghostly woman lunged at her, her icy fingers digging into her neck. Stacy's vision blurred as she struggled to breathe. She clawed at the woman, trying to push her away, but it was as if her touch drained the life force from her. Her strength ebbed away, and she slumped over the wheel, her eyes staring blankly ahead. The next morning, the rising sun revealed the horrors of the cemetery. Stacy's lifeless body sat slumped in the driver's seat, her skin now as white as the marble headstones surrounding them, and on the seat beside her, they found the photograph, damp and disturbed, as if disturbed by a recent foot. The image showed the same ethereal woman who had vanished from the car, forever trapping her driver in an eternal ride through the shadows. But this story isn't unique to Stacy. There have been many drivers that have had similar encounters. One man from Florida shared his terrifying experience of picking up a hitchhiker, who turned out to be a ghost. He was driving on a long highway in the middle of nowhere, when suddenly he saw a woman in her mid-20s, standing by the side of the road. She was attractive with long flowing hair and a tight dress. He offered her a ride, and she eagerly accepted, thanking him profusely. She sat in the passenger seat and they fell into silence. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror and noticed that she had an eerie glow about her, and her eyes were vacant. She seemed detached from reality. As they approached her destination, he checked the address on his phone and realized that it was an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. He said to her, "Are you sure this is the right address?" She turned to him with a sad smile and said, "No, it's not. I just wanted to sit in a car and talk to someone." And then she disappeared. Another driver from Washington recounted a similar experience while working for a taxi service. He got a call late one night to pick up a female passenger from a bar downtown. When he arrived, he saw a woman sitting on a bar stool waiting for him. She paid for the ride up front in cash and got into his car. Throughout the journey, she was silent and didn't provide a destination. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror and noticed that her eyes were glowing an unnatural green. Just before they reached a bridge, she suddenly leaped out of the car and vanished into thin air. He recounted feeling an icy coldness where she had been sitting, and even found a strand of her hair on the seat. Do you think these are truly stories of ghosts? Or could there be a more rational explanation? If you believe in ghosts, do you think they might use ride-sharing services for a little company or to deliver messages? Share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, please share for more.